Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the TSG podcast. I'm your host, Arian. In this episode, I'm not going to have a special guest with me, so you're just stuck hearing me blab away for this episode, but I hope you all enjoy it. For this episode, I want to talk about this idea of progression when it comes to powerlifting. So in powerlifting, or even just strength training in general, ideally what we want is for our numbers to go up. So for example, if we have a 100 kilogram squat, we want to get to a 102.5 kilogram squat and then a 105 kilogram squat. But how do we actually know we're progressing towards those numbers? One way obviously would be to do a competition. So if we go and enter a powerlifting competition, then we can go and do our 3 attempts and try and hit that 102.5 kilogram squat on our third attempt and say, hey, last competition I hit 100 kilograms. This competition I hit 102.5 kilograms. So I progressed and I may progress towards my goal if that's what my goal was set prior to that competition. But now what if we aren't competing, or if we want to know we're heading in the right direction before the competition? So for example, let's say we have a competition that's 16 weeks away. Do we want to wait and train a particular way for 16 weeks only to find out at the competition that we weren't able to hit our number and we weren't progressing in the right direction? And now we kind of feel like we wasted those 16 weeks and now we have to restart the process again, maybe do another 16 weeks or 20 weeks before our next competition. And then again, see maybe we're not progressing towards our numbers. So can we instead find ways throughout that 16 weeks heading into that competition to make sure we're heading in the right direction? Okay, so we don't have to necessarily hit the 102.5 kilogram squat in training to know, okay, hey, after 4 weeks, I've already hit this number. Let's set new goals, or hey, we're ready for a competition. But just have signs, indications that things are heading in the right direction, things are positive, we are getting stronger, and eventually we'll get to that number. So, for example, if we're following just a generic, let's say, cookie cutter program, that's, let's say, linear periodization. It's starting maybe off with higher volume, lower intensity, and the volume comes down over time as the intensity goes up over time. With that type of training, we can go and look and see what are some ways that we can figure out we're heading in the right direction, that we're progressing. One is, for example, looking at the total volume or workload that we're doing for a particular session or for a particular week. So as an example, let's say we're following a program that has day 1, 3 sets of 5 at 80%, and day 2, 3 sets of 3 at 85%. And let's just stick with squat for now, just to kind of keep things simple to one lift. Okay. So now let's say we progressed in our previous cycle from a 3x5 at 80 and 3x3 at 85 to 4 sets of 5 at 80% and 4 sets of 3 at 85% for a particular week. So now in this particular week of this new training cycle, we are doing more volume or more total work than the volume that we were doing in that week for the previous training cycle. So we kind of hit a volume PR or personal record. So we can use that as a sign of progression. Now, it may not be the best indicator that you've gotten stronger, but it can be an indicator because volume is going to relate to strength gains. And so if we are doing more work, okay, and providing a bigger stimulus on our body is going to have to adapt and get stronger. And so we can use that and say, hey, we did more volume on day 1, we did more volume on day 2, and we did more volume in the entire week than the previous training cycle, or maybe even across an entire month or across the entire 16-week training block, we did more volume than the previous training cycle or the previous month. And that is going to be a sign that we're going to get stronger because we are forcing our body to adapt to a bigger and bigger stimulus. Another way we can look at it, again, let's go with that same program. And as we're going through our linear periodization, our volume is coming down, our intensity is going up. Maybe later on in the training cycle, we're hitting personal records on a particular set. So let's say, for example, we're doing a top set of 3. And previously we've done 1 set of 3 at, let's say, 87.5 kilograms on squat. And then in this new training cycle, we hit a set of 3 at 90 kilograms on squat. So now for that same single protocol, 1 set of 3 reps, we were able to increase our weight from 87.5 to 90 kilograms. And so now we're hitting a personal record for our best 3 rep max. And again, that can be a sign. If our 3-rep max is going up, then it's going to be an indicator that our strength is going up. Now, the more reps per set it is, it's probably less accurate. So if you're hitting a new personal record on your set of 8 or your set of 10 reps, it may not be as accurate as setting a new record on your set of 2 reps or 3 reps, because some people may be good at reps, some people may not. And also you may have maybe not been as good at repping before on, let's say, set of 8s, but over time you've gotten more efficient and you're able to do more weight, but it doesn't necessarily translate to a 1-rep max. But if you're hitting maybe more weight on your set of 2, your set of 3, maybe even sets of 4 and 5, that can be a better indicator that you've gotten stronger. Especially eventually it leads to, let's say, your max. So let's say you hit the 90 for 3 and your previous max was 100 kilograms for 1, is the example we're using. And then let's say you're hitting 95 for 2 and then 97.5 for 2 and then 100 for 2, then that's a really good indication, obviously, that your 100 kilogram max has gone up, since now you're able to hit it for 2 reps. So that's another way we can do it. But again, it depends on how your program is designed, okay? And also what metrics are you tracking to be able to understand, oh, I hit a volume PR, oh, I hit a new weight PR for my 3-rep max, okay? Some programs may be designed so that you can do more volume over time, or you or your coach has to design it so that you're doing maybe more volume in this training cycle compared to the previous training cycle. Some programs may have those kind of top sets so that you can then work up to a new 3-rep max or a new 4-rep max, and then be able to say, hey, I beat my previous 3-rep max, again, if it's something that you are tracking. Or we can think about what are other ways that we can kind of continue to see are you progressing, okay? One way we like to think about it at TSG is called the test-retest method. And so we are looking at different types of tests that we can do, and then how often can we do these tests to get an indication if we're moving in the right direction or not. And the reason for this, again, is we don't want to wait till the end. And as coaches or even as lifters, there's no way to know for sure going in that something's going to work. Even if we're using a previous training program that worked successfully before, it may not be successful this time. You may use even a program that wasn't successful before that does end up being successful this time. And so past performance on how fast you're progressing or what type of training you've been doing is not necessarily going to be a guarantee for what's going to work now. And so any coach is trying to guarantee you that, hey, this is like the perfect program for you, and this is going to put X amount of kilos on your squat in 4 weeks or whatever like that. You want to be wary of that, because there's no way to know 100% for sure how you're going to respond to the training, especially the more variable like your life is outside training. You know, we're not professional powerlifters here getting paid millions and millions of dollars to just focus on powerlifting for our career. A lot of people have maybe jobs within powerlifting or even outside of powerlifting, and other things like they may have a significant other, they may have kids, they may take care of parents, whatever. And so they're going to have other life stresses that are going to affect your training. So even the perfect program may not work if you have too much life stress or other things going on that are going to hold you back. And so there's no way to be able to guarantee what's going to work. What a coach is doing is taking the knowledge they have, the experience they have, your previous training history, or any information they have on you, to design what they think is going to be the best thing for you right now. And so you can think about it as like a hypothesis, okay? Your coach is as a scientist, and they're saying, hey, we want to test this hypothesis. We want to test this training and see whether the evidence of whatever data we're collecting is showing that it's ending up getting you stronger, staying the same, or getting you weaker. And then based on whatever evidence is showing, then the coach will come in and make a change. If things are showing signs that you are getting stronger, hey, maybe we continue to do more of the same. If things are showing that, hey, we're kind of stagnant, we're not getting stronger or weaker, then the coach may say, okay, maybe the training we're doing is maybe more of a maintenance dose, and we need to come in and change things. Maybe we add some more volume or something like that in order to create a bigger stimulus in order to get the adaptation that we want. And if you are regressing, then maybe the coach comes in and looks like, okay, maybe we're giving you too big of a stimulus, and maybe right now in your life, you're not able to recover from that. And so you're getting too fatigued and it's just bleeding into other sessions, and you're not able to then do the upcoming training properly. And so, hey, what if we reduce the volume a little bit and allow your body to recover more to be able to be more effective for each of the training sessions? Okay. So the coach is kind of coming up with a smart guess or a hypothesis of like, hey, I think this will work. And then they're going to come and test that hypothesis by monitoring how the training is going for the athlete, maybe making adjustments along the way. And then based on how you are trending, make adjustments in the necessary direction. So that's why, again, for TSG, we kind of think of it as this test retest method, because we want to do different tests throughout the training cycle and retest it. So we may do a test, maybe make a change to the next block, and then do a retest and see, hey, did we get any changes? And then whatever adjustments we need to make for the next block, make the adjustments for the next block, and then do another retest and see how things are going. Okay. So we're not just kind of leaving things for the end and saying, hey, I hope after 4 or 5 months, this kind of training has worked well for us and that we get you stronger. We are going into the training cycle at key points and measuring how you are performing. And then based on those measurements, deciding what kind of changes we need to make, if we need to make changes at all. Okay. And then between those tests, those points we're measuring, we can still track things. Like I said, we can still track volume PRs. We can still track personal records. We can still track RPE PRs. So what I mean by that is if you're doing a particular weight, let's say a top single, and you're doing, let's say 90 kilos, and every week you're doing 90 kilos, and the RPE goes from 8.5 down to 8, down to 7.5, down to 7, then you're hitting RPE PRs along the way. And at a certain point, that's going to be significantly different as far as like an RP 8.5 versus a 7, that you've most likely got stronger. So again, we can track things like RPE PRs. If someone uses a velocity tracker, so some kind of device that you can attach to the bar to track the velocity of the particular rep or a particular set, or these days you can use phones, they may or may not be as accurate as having the string on the bar. Just depends on how good the quality of the video is, how good the app is at tracking the bar speed, everything like that. But you can then use a phone and recording yourself to, again, check the velocity. And then we can look at velocity PRs as well. So for example, again, if we're doing the one set of one on squat at 90 kilograms, and it's moving from, let's say, 0.25 meters per second to 0.3 meters per second to 0.35 meters per second over time, then we can see those as velocity PRs. You're getting faster and faster. And at a certain point, it's significantly enough faster that it is a good indication that you've gotten stronger. So not only can we use these tests at key points throughout the training cycle, but then we can monitor things as far as the data that we're collecting on a session by session or weekly basis to, again, make sure we're moving things in the right direction. So these are some things for you, okay, if you're a lifter and or a coach, to kind of think about, and not just be like, okay, I'm just going to give someone training, or I'm just going to go do training and just hope the training works. Or I'm just going to go, pick this cookie cutter program online and not track any of the metrics for myself and just hope that it works. And then in the future, just grab a different cookie cutter program, not compare it at all to the previous training cycle to see what kind of changes there are. Okay, we want to be a little bit more scientific with our process. We want to be a little bit smarter in our selection of training programs, even if we're doing cookie cutter training programs, stuff that's free out there, to figure out how can we progress our training over time. And then what kind of data do we want to collect within a training cycle to make sure we're hitting those rep PRs, those velocity PRs, and then potentially what kind of tests we want to do to, again, get an indication that we are moving in the right direction of our goal. So that way we can use all that data and say, hey, this training is not working for me. Let me analyze what's not working. Is it maybe a lack of volume? Is it too much volume? Is it not specific enough for you? Does it just not work well with your schedule and you're being very inconsistent? So figure out what kind of changes you make. Or if things are working very well, then hey, let's keep doing more of the same. Let's just not go and randomly change things just to switch things up to keep things interesting or whatever, or you found something new that seems interesting. This is working. Let's stick with it and continue to maximize all the progress we can get out of it. And then when the progress starts slowing down or stagnating, then let's look into changing things. So let me share my screen here and show you guys a little bit of a behind the scenes of some of the things that we do at TSG. One is going to be some slides from our coaching mentorship. Okay, so we have a coaching mentorship that you can take if you want to. We have pre-recorded lectures as well as a live mentorship that we do a couple semesters per year. And so I'll throw that information down below if that's something that you're interested in taking in order to either improve yourself as a coach, or if you're looking to become a coach, you can take that. But these are some of the things that we teach in that mentorship. And one of the things is this test retest model. So I'm bringing you some secret kind of behind the scenes slides here from our mentorship that other people pay for. And so here's just a little bit of a way to kind of visualize it if you are watching this podcast video. If not, you can kind of just listen to me go through this diagram here, which is our test and retest method. So what we want to do is do some tests after each mesocycle or each block or each month, whatever term you want to use, to see the effectiveness of the training. So here in this example here on the far left, we have someone who did a competition. So going back to our example, let's say we have an athlete that did a powerlifting competition and they hit a 100-kilogram squat. And now they're going to start a new training cycle. And so they're going to do 3 blocks, okay, or 3 mesocycles. And here we have them named a preparatory, development, and competition phase. Those are the terms that we use. And then they're going to have another competition, okay? And so we're going to do this preparatory phase or block. Let's say it's 4 or 5 weeks long. And then instead of waiting to the competition to figure out whether things are going in the right direction or not, we can do some kind of test. So at the end of the preparatory phase, we're going to do like a deload week to allow the body to recover. And at the end of that deload week, we'll do some kind of test and use that test to see whether we're heading in the right direction. Okay, we're seeing if the training dose that we did leading up was effective or was not effective. Okay, so it gives us more of a objective reading of how things are going, and then we can adjust what we want to do going forward based on that. Are we going at the rate we want to progress? Are we stagnant? Are we regressing? And what kind of changes do we want to make based on any of those outcomes? Then what we can do is do our next phase, our development phase. Okay, so we do a 4 or 5 week development phase. And then at the end of the development phase, again, we can do a deload week. And at the end of the deload week, do some kind of test. Okay, and then we get another objective data point of this test. Okay, is the person heading in the right direction or not? If they're not, what kind of adjustments do we need to make? And then we have our next phase, our competition phase, where we're finally peaking for the competition. So we can do another 4 or 5 week competition phase, let's say in this case. And then if we want to, we can also do a test inside of the competition phase to get a final test of how things are going and create our game plan for the competition based on that test result and the other test results. So we can take all those results and say, based on how training has been going and this most recent test, we think we should set our first attempt, second attempt, and third attempt for squat, bench press, and deadlift at X, Y, and Z. And then we can do our taper for the competition, and we can go in the competition and compete, and ideally then be able to hit our goal of 102.5 kilograms on squat or whatever our goal happens to be. So again, we're not waiting to the end, okay, going from our first competition to, let's say, 16 weeks later, our second competition, and saying, okay, let's find out now if things are working or not. What we're doing is we're doing tests in between. So we can do a competition, then we can do 3 tests during our training cycle, and then another competition. Okay, so now we have 3 tests between the 2 competitions, and across everything, we have 5 data points or 5 different types of tests to again see how the athlete's progressing, see how we're doing as a coach, what adjustments we also may need to make as a coach. And more importantly, those tests are set up throughout the training cycle so we can make adjustments more quickly. If we're going in the wrong direction, okay, if you're driving from your town to another town that's, 4 hours away, you don't want to drive for 3.5 hours and then say, okay, let me pull up the map now and see how close we are, and then find out you just went completely in the wrong direction. Instead of going north, you're going south, or you're going southwest or something like that, and you're just completely off your directions from where you want to go. What you do is you pull up your map, or in this case, you're doing these tests throughout the process to be like, okay, let's make sure we're heading in the right direction. Okay, we are heading in the direction. Let's keep doing more of the same. Or, oh crap, we're not going in the right direction. Let's come in, make some adjustments to the training, and get us back in the right direction. So that's kind of what we like to do at TSG with this test retest model. And so what I can do is jump over here to a couple more slides to kind of show you all, if you're watching our video for our podcast, some of the other things we like to teach here in the mentorship. So let me pull up the different types of tests that we can do. So right here, okay, so I've been talking a lot about these types of tests, doing a competition and also doing tests throughout the training cycle. But you may be asking, well, Aaron, what do you mean by these tests? Should I just be maxing out at the end of every block or every month? And no, you should not be maxing out at the end of every single month. There are different types of tests or different types of assessments that you can be doing. Okay, so here on this slide, okay, you can see, and if you're listening, I'll break it down. We can break it up into two different types of tests as two main categories. And then inside those categories, look at different types we can do. So one type would be a direct assessment, and another type would be an indirect assessment. And what we mean by that is that for a direct assessment, that's going to provide a definitive indication of your maximum strength. And the way that that's done, or the reason why we call it direct, is because you're evaluating the performance at maximum intensity levels. Because powerlifting is a sport where you're doing a 1 rep max, which is with as much weight as possible, then the most direct assessment of that is 1, doing a competition, or 2, doing a 1 rep max in training. Okay. So those will be, a competition is obviously a direct assessment, is exactly what your sport is. And then a 1 rep max test in a gym will be as close as possible to that as you can get. Because again, you are testing your maximum intensity levels, and you can make it a mock meet as closely as possible by selecting attempts, by trying to time yourself, just like in a competition. You can wear your singlet and have people judge you, or record it and have your coach judge you. And so you can try and mimic the competition as much as possible to get as direct of an assessment as possible. So that's kind of what we consider a direct assessment, a competition, or a 1 rep max in the gym. Now, what is the other one is indirect assessments, okay? These are less conclusive, okay, for maximum strength, volume tolerance, and power, because we're evaluating the performance at sub-maximal intensity. So we're not going to a true 100% max, okay? We can do other intensities and other reps other than a 1 rep max. So what are some indirect assessments that you can use for your training? One would be a AMRAP test. Okay, so AMRAP stands for as many reps as possible. So you can pick a particular intensity or a particular weight. Let's say we're doing 85 kilos if our max is 100 kilos, and we can do the 85 kilos on squat for as many reps as possible and see how many reps we get. And then based on 85 kilos and however many reps we can use that to see if it beats previous AMRAP tests that we've done, okay, to see if we hit a new rep max with that weight. And we can also use different estimated 1 rep max calculators or formulas to see what is the estimated max and see whether we're trending in the right direction or not. So for example, if we're doing these AMRAP tests along the way at the end of the preparatory phase, at the end of the development phase, at the end of the competition phase, and then we're seeing our estimated 1 rep max, for example, we got 5 reps at 85 kilos, and let's say it says 101 kilos estimated 1 rep max, and then we do, let's say, 90 kilos for 3 reps or 4 reps, and it's pointing to, let's say, 102 or 103 max. And then we do our final assessment. Let's say we do 95 kilos for 2 reps or 3 reps, and it's pointing to like a 104 or 105 max. Then we can see that each test is showing that we're trending in the right direction. We're all 3 of the tests are above our 100 kilo training max, and they are trending trending towards or above our 102.5 kilogram goal that we have for ourselves. So that would be positive signs that we are doing the right things. We should continue to do those things and we're heading in the direction of our goal. But if we did AMRAP tests and let's say at 85 kilos instead of 5 reps, we only got 3 reps. Okay, maybe it's then pointing towards like a 100 kilo max. Then we do our test at 90 kilos and let's say we only get 1 or 2 reps. And it's like, okay, now we're pointing towards 97.5 or 100 kilos. So we're kind of still stagnant or maybe regressing. And then we try and do our test with 95 kilos and we get only 1 rep and it's an all-out grinder. Well, now it's showing that maybe our max is 95 kilos or maybe even 97.5 on a good day. So that's kind of showing that we're not heading in the right direction. We're actually regressing and we should maybe come in and start changing things ahead of time rather than waiting towards the end. Okay. So that's how we can use, for example, an indirect assessment like an AMRAP test to be able to gauge how things are going at the end of each block and make adjustments going forward. Some other indirect assessments we can do a RPE assessment, okay? So for example, we went over setting the one set of 1 rep, okay, at a particular weight, like let's say 90 kilos. We can then do that for at the end of each block or multiple weeks within a block and see how the RPE is changing, okay? And based on that RPE, if it's going up or down or staying the same, we can see if we're moving in the right direction. And again, we can use that weight, the rep, and the RPE to be able to come up with an estimated winner max based on some kind of formula and see whether the estimated winner max is trending in the right direction or not, okay? And you don't have to only do a single when it comes to RPE test. We can do the RPE test at different reps, and also it can be different reps at different assessment points. So just like with the AMRAP assessment, like I said, we did the AMRAP assessment with like, let's say 85 kilos, 90 kilos, and 95 kilos. We could do an RPE test like a triple at 85 kilos, gauge the RPE, a double at 90 kilos, gauge the RPE, and a single at 95 kilos, gauge the RPE for the preparatory phase, development phase, and the competition phase. Or we can tell the person, hey, work up to an RP 8 single at the end of the preparatory phase, work up to an RP 8.5 single at the end of the development phase, and work up to an RP 9 single at the end of the competition phase. So that we're doing different RPs as well. And the higher the RP is, the more accurate it's going to be to your 1 rep max. So the same as, like I said, with reps, if you're doing a set of 10 or a set of 8, okay, it may not be as accurate of an assessment of your true strength for 1 rep max compared to doing, doubles, triples, or sets of 4. So when it comes to RP as well, if you're doing RP assessments with like RP 5 or 6, it's harder to gauge and may not be as an accurate assessment. It may skew your numbers. But if you're doing like RP 8.5, 9, 9.5, it's going to be a little bit easier to gauge and be a little bit of a better assessment or estimate of your strength. So that's another thing we can do. We can use RP assessments at the end of each phase to make sure we're heading in the right direction. And then also here we can use VBT or velocity-based training. So like I said, you can use some kind of velocity device, and similar to these other assessments, you can select a particular velocity or pick a certain weight and track the velocity and see how that is trending. So again, we can do, for example, a single at 85 kilos, see what the velocity is, compare it to other assessments, and also use an estimated formula to figure out what our 1 rep max is based on that test. Then at the end of the development phase, we can do, let's say 90 kilos for a single, check the velocity, do the same kind of thing. And at the end of the competition phase, do like a 95 kilo single, check the velocity. And again, compared to previous data, use estimated 1 rep max formulas to figure out what our estimated 1 rep max is. And at each point, make sure we're heading in the direction that we want to head in, okay? So we don't have to do a 1 rep max every time, and you shouldn't do a 1 rep max every time. You want to be limiting how many times throughout the year that you're doing a competition or a 1 rep max in the gym. We want to use these other assessments, these indirect assessments, to be able to test that we're moving in the right direction as well, because these will be oftentimes a little bit easier to do, especially like if you're, for example, in a preparatory phase and you're not training at max intensity. Let's say in a preparatory phase coming off a competition, you're training at, let's say, 65 to 80% or 70 to 85%. You don't want to jump straight from training at, let's say, 80% or 85% to just maxing out. It's not going to go well for you, most likely. Your body's not prepared for maxing out. That's why we peak for competitions by training at 90% plus and preparing our body for a full all-out max. And so if you're only training at 80, 85% max and you try and jump straight to trying to hit a new PR on a test week, then you may underperform, you may fail a lift, you may get injured, whatever, and then it's not going to be an accurate indication of how that prep went because you just picked a improper assessment to gauge it. But then we can use these methods to be able to say, hey, I've been training at 70, 80%, so let me do an AMRAP at 80% and use that to gauge it. Or, hey, I'm in the development phase, I've been training at 75 to 87.5%. Let me do an RPE test at 87.5% to gauge my strength. Or let's say I'm finally in a competition phase and I'm training at, let's say, up to 95%. I can do a RPE test or a velocity test at 95%, or even both. We can track the velocity and gauge our RPE and use both data points at 95% to see if we're heading in the right direction, come up with our final game plan for the competition, everything like that. Okay, so we want to be using these indirect assessments throughout the training cycle because we don't want to rely too much on the competition and want to max in the gym because we want to limit those throughout the training cycle and throughout the year. But we still want to wait, obviously, like I said, to test between competitions so we can use these indirect assessments to test between the competitions. Okay, let's see what other slides I can show you all. What I can actually do is hop back over here a little bit earlier in this particular presentation. Okay, and show you a little bit as far as the hypothesis of TSG as well when it comes to training, and then why we do these kind of things like tracking the data points that we do and doing the test that we do. Okay, so if you are a lifter who coaches yourself or you're a coach that's coaching different lifters out there, you should have some kind of hypothesis on how someone gets bigger and stronger because that's what you are trying to go for. You're competing on powerlifting, so your main goal might be strength, but also putting on more muscle mass will lead to more strength. Or you're coaching someone, for example, in weightlifting, which is the same idea. Coaching someone in bodybuilding, you're trying to get them, bigger and leaner. And so you're gonna, whatever your goal is, whatever you're coaching, you want to have a hypothesis of what you believe leads to the person, let's say, getting stronger or bigger. Okay, so this is kind of the TSG training hypothesis when it comes to powerlifting and how to get stronger. Okay. The first thing is that we need these preconditions in place. So again, if you're watching the video, you can kind of read through the slide. You can pause it and read it all on your own as well. If you're listening, I'll go over the key points. So the preconditions that we need to have for effective training are things like readiness, nutrition, musculoskeletal health and tolerance, adaptive potential, interacting biopsychosocial factors, and fatigue management. So we need all these things kind of as our base thing in place before we can even train. So if someone's like, let's say, nutrition completely off, they're like, they're malnourished, okay, they're not getting enough calories in, they're a huge deficit, they're not getting the proper vitamins and minerals, and they're not hitting accurate protein and everything like that, no training is going to get them in the right place, okay? We need to first get them into a healthy status when it comes to nutrition and then be able to train and get them bigger and stronger. Same thing, let's say like readiness. If they're just like very sleep deprived, okay, if they have insomnia and they have like some other, health issues going on, then it's going to be very difficult or impossible to get stronger. So we need to go in and first fix those. So we have to have some kind of baseline when it comes to these preconditions of things are kind of in the normal range, okay, even though it may vary up and down from day to day or week to week, but somewhere in a normal range for a healthy human to be able to actually get bigger and stronger. Now, when those preconditions are sufficient, we believe there is a specific range of volume and intensity that's required to increase strength. Okay, so for every person, okay, if we can go in and find a way to measure it, we can like look at you right now and say, For you and your conditions right now, your training history, your age, your injuries, what you've done, everything to this point, right now, there's X amount of volume and Y% of intensity that's required for you to get stronger. You can do more than that and potentially get even stronger at a faster rate, or you can do less than that and potentially maintain your strength. And if you start going lower and lower, then your strength will decrease. Okay. Now, it's impossible to know that point, and that point can be moving based on all these kind of factors and how things change day to day. But there's going to be some kind of volume intensity is required for you to increase strength, because you have to force your body to adapt to get stronger. Your body naturally doesn't want to do that. It has to adapt to the stimulus that's being provided by you from the outside. Okay. Then for continued progress to occur, okay, this dose must increase over time. Okay. We can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again or do less and think that we're just going to like get stronger. We have to do more over time. Okay. There's different ways that we can do more. This can be done through a direct increase in volume. For example, going from 3 sets of 5 to 4 sets of 5, or in a particular week, going from like 10,000 kilograms of volume to 12,000 kilograms of volume, or an indirect increase in maximal strength level. So if we are just increasing our training max from 100 kilos to 105 kilos to 110 kilos, then we're running the percentages for our program of 70%, 80%, 85%. We're naturally also training with heavier weights, which will increase the volume that we are doing. Okay. However, training can become unproductive if dose and preconditions are imbalanced. So if there's any issue between those preconditions and the dose, where let's say we're doing too big of a dose and our readiness and our nutrition stuff aren't in place where we can't recover, then we may get too fatigued and we may not be able to progress our training. So we have to be mindful of, we can't just like add in infinite numbers of volume and just say, hey, we'll just keep adding more volume at huge amounts and get stronger. There's going to be a certain point where then it's just too much volume for that person and they may not be able to recover. Okay. Then final point here, the required dose may change, okay, over time. And it may change due to things like changes in technique, changes in body composition, changes in your conditioning status due to time off, illness, or injury. Okay. So for example, if you found the right volume and intensity and frequency and exercise, everything to get stronger when it comes to the conventional deadlift, and now you want to switch to the sumo deadlift, it may not and probably won't be the same amount of volume, intensity, and frequency and everything like that for sumo. Okay. Maybe because your sumo is weaker right now and less technically sound, you may be able to get away with lower frequency and lower volume and be able to progress just as fast. And then at a certain point, maybe then you have to increase the volume, like I said above, to continue to progress your sumo deadlift. Okay. Same thing if you're like changing a weight class. Okay. If you're going, for example, from the 93 kilo weight class and cutting down to 83 kilos, the amount of volume and intensity and stuff that you did in a 93 kilo class in order to get stronger will be different than the 83 kilo class. In addition, during that time that you're cutting down, okay, you're changing your nutrition and putting yourself in a caloric deficit, then you may not be able to handle more volume naturally. You may have to actually reduce volume in order to be able to still recover from the training while you're in a deficit. Okay, so changes in body composition may change the dose that you have to do. And same things like if you go on a vacation for a couple weeks and you're not training at all, when you first come back, you don't have to do the same volume as before. You can most likely do less volume and regain things because you kind of took time off, you've lost some work capacity, and you have to kind of ease back into things. Illness will be the same thing because you're probably taking time off. Your body's not in the same position to handle that kind of training before. And same thing if you have like some kind of major injury, okay, that muscle may be smaller and may be weaker, okay, or maybe the ligaments and stuff around it are a little more compromised. You have to maybe build up your mental confidence as well. And so you have to maybe ease back into things, and you can probably get stronger with less volume, and then over time getting back to increasing that volume. Okay, so this is our hypothesis, if something that you may want to implement when it comes to your coaching, or maybe for something for you to think about, like, hey, what's actually my hypothesis when it comes to getting stronger? And maybe you can write it down so it's something you remember, and then when you program, that's what you're programming for. So when I'm talking about this test-retest method. And the reasons why we do it is for these kind of things, that we want to find that specific range of volume intensity that is required for that person to increase strength. So we want to do these tests to see whether that person is actually increasing strength with the training that we're doing, or if we have to make an adjustment. And also then we do these tests and we track our data to make sure that we are increasing this dose over time. Okay. One way you can kind of think about this, okay, that we teach people is like if you're going to go outside and get a tan. Okay. So if you're someone who doesn't get a tan at all, okay, you're maybe very pale, you don't go to the beach or anything very much, okay, you can't just go out in the sun the first time and sit out there in direct sunlight, high UV for like 10 hours. You're going to get sunburn. It's going to be very damaging to your body. You have to go out there and maybe do a small amount. You maybe go out there for 30 minutes or an hour, okay, and then you go back inside. You spend some days letting your body recover. You go out maybe again 30 minutes or an hour, get more of a tan, come back inside, spend some days recovering, and kind of repeat that process. And with that small amount, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, you're able to build up a little tan. But as now you build up a tan, your body has gotten more resilient. And just going out and constantly doing 30 minutes, you may not develop a further tan. Your body's used to that stimulus now. It's like, oh, I can do 30 minutes a week or 30 minutes twice a week, no problem, with the amount of tan that I have. So that means you have to increase the dose. You may have to now go out 2 times a week and do, let's say, 1 to 2 hours to be able to create a bigger stimulus for your body to have to adapt and get a further tan. Now, if you go and then, spend 6 months somewhere where the sun never goes up, if you're somewhere in the Arctic or whatever during the winter season and you lose your tan and you're not getting that 2 hours twice a week anymore, now when you go back, you don't have to do the 2 hours twice a week. You can go back down maybe to the 30 minutes twice a week and rebuild your tan and again, progressively overload over time. So that's kind of that same concept here when it comes to our training. Okay. So the last thing I want to show you here as well, instead of going to our mentorship, is let's look at a actual training here for one of my athletes. So here is our graphs tab of our athlete management system. And so in this athlete management system, we track a lot of different things. One of the things we track here, as you can see, is the volume per lift versus the 1 max or the estimated 1 max. So here, these bars are all the volume that this athlete's doing on a weekly basis. Okay, the sets times the reps times the weight for all the competition squats and all the close variations. And then this line over top of it is their average weekly estimated 1 max. Okay, so here you can see, for example, for the volume, how we increased the volume from week 1 to week 4. We did a deload on week 5, and then we increased the volume from week 5 to week 8, deloaded here on week 9 and 10, increased the volume from week 10 to 14, deloaded. Kind of, you can see it's a little bit of a cycle here where we're kind of increasing the volume to a peak, then deloading, ramping up the volume again to a peak, deloading, so on and so forth. Okay, and then we can see how the estimated 1 max is trending. We can see initially when this athlete started with me, they were trending in the right direction for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then things started going in the wrong direction. You can see here, we did a test on week 5. They didn't perform their best. They started trending down, and so I had to make adjustments. And you can see, if you're watching this, if you're not, I'll tell you that we reduced the volume. So for example, if you look at week 4, we were doing 8,815 kilograms of volume. And if we compare that to weeks like 7 and 8, we brought it down to about 6,000 or 6,200. So from 88 down to 62 or 6,000, okay? So that the person can then recover and be able to respond well and start progressing things again. So we were heading in the wrong direction as far as the weekly 1 maxes, and we had to go and make an adjustment. And you can see now from week 9 going forward, things have started trending in the right direction again, okay? So our estimated 1 max started around, let me jump over here, 218 kilos. We got up to a peak of 228 kilos. From 228, it started trending down to 203 kilos, so worse than the 218 that we started with. And then since that 203, we've made changes to the volume. We've made some other changes along the way. And this athlete's been able to trend up from the 203 back up to the 228 peak that they hit before, and most recently getting up to 238. So things are starting now to hit better than when we first started, and things have been trending in the right direction for the last 10 weeks or so on the squat. We can kind of see the same thing here for the bench press, where we started out at 168. Things went well at the beginning, hit this peak of 176, and then dropped down quickly to 163. And now for 163, we've been able to trend in the right direction and get to our best here on week 20 of 180 kilos, so surpassing the 176 from before. And similar thing here for deadlift, where we started off around 254, got up to 263 quickly on week 3. Things started trending in the wrong direction, and for deadlift, it took longer to kind of figure things out. So again, like I said, your coach isn't going to know everything and be able to guarantee progress for you. They are a scientist. They're testing things out, seeing the evidence for or against where you're as far as your goals, and then making adjustments. So we had to test things out for a number of weeks. Okay, we hit this low point on week 11 of 225, so quite a bit down from 265 down to 225. And then since week 11, we've been trending in the right direction. Things have been going well. And on week 20, we hit this new peak of 268 kilos, more than the 263 from before. Okay, so this kind of showing a real life example of how we can track the estimated water max to get these data points on a weekly basis. And based on this information, as well as other information from the athlete, their training videos, everything like that, we're making adjustments going forward to get us in the right direction, rather than just waiting till a competition to figure out whether things are working or not. Okay. Another thing you can see here at the bottom is that we do keep track of the assessments. Okay. So for this particular athlete, you can see, for example, for squat, they did a couple assessments, one end of December, one in March. In this case, end of December, they did 205 kilos for 5 reps. And then in March, they did 210 kilos for 5 reps. Okay. So we can see that as a new 5 rep max personal record for them. They were able to go from 205 to 210. Okay. We tracked the RP as well. So you can see the 205 for 5 was RP 9, and that gave an estimated water max of 237.5. Then the March assessment was 210 for 5 reps at RP 9.5, and that gave an estimated water max of 240 kilos. So again, we can now use these specific assessments, okay, that were done at the end of specific blocks to see whether we're heading in the right direction and how does our estimated water max compare to our training max. So in this case, we are heading in the right direction, going from 237 to 240. We can switch to bench press and see if our bench press, they did 155 for 4 reps in RP 9. That produced an estimated water max of 175. And then most recently did 165 for 2 at RP 8. And that produced an estimated water max of 180 kilos. So that's heading in the right direction as well, up 5 kilos in that 3 months and change. And then for deadlift, we did 220 kilos for 7 reps at RP 9.5. And you can see that estimated water max is 267.5 kilograms. And then our most recent assessment, we did 227.5 for 5 at an RP 8. And then that's showing an estimated water max of 272.5 kilograms. So you can see that one progressed about 5 kilograms in that same 3 months or so time. So again, that's another data point. So we can look at the estimated water maxes on a weekly basis, and we can look at these indirect assessments to see whether the training that we're doing is effective for the athlete or not. Okay, so hopefully that gives you guys some things to think about when it comes to your own training, or if you are coaching other athletes. Okay, is one, what is your hypothesis for getting bigger or stronger, or whatever type of coaching that you are doing? Maybe you should write that down, similar to what we have that I showed you, and having a hypothesis of kind of what is the base levels for the athlete in order to be in a position to be successful. What is the hypothesis of how they get stronger? And then how may that change depending on as you're getting closer to the genetic limits, if they get injured, if they're changing weight classes, those kind of things. Okay. Then when it comes to our training, what are different things that we can monitor as far as data to see that we're trending in the right direction, and even what kind of test do we want to maybe do throughout the training cycle to make sure we're heading in the right direction, so we're not just leaving it for the end. We go to a competition and maybe find out the 4 or 5 months that we did for training was a complete waste. Okay. If we can, we want to test things more throughout that training cycle without disrupting the training too much. And so then we can see which way we're heading and what adjustments do we need to make. So you can do those indirect assessments that I went over that I recommend, because we don't want to do the direct assessments too often throughout the year. We'd rather use indirect assessments throughout the year. You can do the AMRAP test, RPE test, velocity test. You can combine these different types of tests. There's different ways that you can do the RPE test or velocity test as well. So there's lots of different variations to that, and maybe even other tests that you can do, plus looking at things like volume PRs or rep PRs, all that kind of stuff, to be able to assess at the end of each phase, or maybe other parts within a phase, to make sure things are heading in the right direction. And as a coach, then make the necessary adjustments to head in the right direction if something is off. Okay. And then you can still use the direct assessments throughout the year. You can still have some competitions throughout the year. Let's say the athlete wants to compete 2 or 3 times per year. You can use those as direct assessments. Or even if they're not competing, you can then have them do like a mock meet in the gym a couple of times throughout the year. So you can have some more direct assessments that are going to be more accurate as far as how things are going, and be able to then use those to update training maxes and then go see whether the training was effective, what kind of adjustments you need to make. Okay. So hopefully this was a helpful episode for you all, discussing our test and retest method and how we like to do our programming when it comes to our athletes, to make sure we are building a plan for them that's going to be setting them up for success. And if we're deviating from our goals, then we can quickly come in and make adjustments to be able to continue to head toward our goals. Okay. If you have any questions about this test or retest method, or maybe you have some different thoughts on the training hypothesis when it comes to getting stronger, then as always, you can drop those down in the comment section below. If you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, or whatever like that, you can throw your thoughts in there. You can throw your questions in there. We'll come in and we'll give our responses and give our thoughts as far as whatever you're asking or whatever discussion you have. And if this is something that you want to hear more of going forward, if you'd like to see more of like kind of what we teach in the mentorship when it comes to powerlifting coaching, if you want to see a little bit more of our athlete management system, or maybe you want me to go over some of the actual programming for some of these athletes rather than showing kind of the overall view, then again, you can drop those comments and say, hey, Arian, we want to see more of the athlete management system. Hey, Arian, we want to see more of the mentorship. Hey, show us some example programs with athletes getting ready for national world championships or whatever. Throw that information down below so we can get an idea of what you all want to see on future episodes, and we can dive deeper into those different subject matters. And then, as always, please give this episode a like. If you haven't reviewed our podcast yet on whatever platform you're listening to, be sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the TSG podcast.